Hello, my name is Rick Boulay, and I'm the president of Killeen Educators Association and of Region 10 of the Texas State Teachers Association. I'd like to welcome you to our Killeen ISD School Board of Trustees Candidate Forum. I'm very pleased to be your moderator for today's discussion. Enshrined in the Constitution is one of the most important functions that we can perform: our ability to select the officials that make the decisions on how the district operates through our vote. It's through this process that we make our voices and wishes known as to how we wish the education of our children to ultimately proceed in Killeen ISD. The level of material support the district provides, the quality and condition of its facilities, the safety of its buses and equipment, how its educators and support professionals are compensated and treated in the workplace. All of these things and more are provided through the election of those serving on the Board of Trustees. We're here to have a conversation with those who are seeking positions on the board for places 6 and 7. Our goal is to learn more about their stances on positions that directly impact students and those who help make their education possible, how they think, and how they would approach the challenges that face KISD as we continue into the future. We encourage you to listen to their responses as many times as you need and give careful consideration to whom you wish to lead the district forward. Most of all, we highly encourage you to use your power to vote. A voice that remains silent is a voice that gives up control over its fate. We want you, the viewer, to know that the questions for tonight's conversation were selected in advance. All the questions will be put to all the candidates to answer so that you may make your own comparisons and draw your own conclusions. The Executive Board of Killeen Educators Association has not made any decisions regarding potential endorsements and will not make them prior to the conclusion and publishing of this forum in its entirety. So the next couple of questions deal with funding and accountability. And starting with Ms. Purser for this question, what is your position on funding for public schools based on high stakes accountability testing like the STAAR exam?
Well, I mean, a lot of this is going to be based on what TEA regulations and of course our state regulations call for. So the way we understand it at this time, that if a student is attending in-person education classes today, they will be taking the exam. We do encourage parents that if their student is a virtual student, that they try to make arrangements for that test. It's real important for everybody to understand that even though this is a test, they really need to know where their student is in their education. We lost from March to May all of that education. We lost a lot of weather days that children have been excused from, but it still doesn't stop the fact that we missed school. And so I do think that parents really need to take a step back and realize what's in the best interest of their kid. We have a lot of students that are not doing well. They didn't adapt well with virtual education. They're having problems in class as well. And so those families are going to have to start making some really tough decisions as to whether or not they promote their student or that they can attend or continue their education through the summer. Because we're going to be offering some sort of bridging program so that if they feel that their student hasn't gotten all the basics of this school year, that they should consider taking some further education throughout the summer at all of our summer school campuses and, possibly make, the right choice for their kid today so that they don't lose the basic skills that they're going to need in order to further their education and make sure that they're either adaptable in the workplace, have a great trade that they learn later in life, or that they also consider a higher education at one of our universities or our colleges. So I really do think that people need to understand, even if they have a virtual student, they really should consider taking the exam to understand what their children have learned this school year. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Purser. Ms. Carter.
Well, I firmly believe that, the STAAR assessment is not going to accurately predict where a student is academically right now because of COVID. We've got students dealing with, mental health issues because of COVID. They're feeling, they've got increased anxiety and depression. Their families also experiencing anxiety and depression, especially if they've had someone, they've lost someone due to COVID. You've got people who are out of jobs, so these are things that, that the students are going to feel because it's close to home. So I don't really think that any test right now is going to be an accurate representation of where they are academically. I also think that, I really don't like the idea when we have the STAAR test, typically when we stop teaching content and we just we just basically start talking about the STAAR test and we start teaching this, well, not teaching, we start reteaching test taking strategies. That in itself right there is when you're pressing on the issue of learn this strategy, learn that strategy, just make sure that you're ready for the STAAR test. That is going to make any child anxious. All right, that's also going to make the teachers anxious because it's almost like it's such a huge deal. And it's one test out of the year. We need to learn to minimize this STAAR test. It doesn't break you as a person. And I think that's what we need to realize. It's just one assessment. It's just one snapshot. And if you fail it, guess what? You have multiple opportunities to pass it. And that's what we need to focus on.
Thank you. Mr. Adams?
Can you repeat the question for me, sir?
Absolutely, sir. What is your position on funding for public schools based on high stakes accountability testing like the STAAR exam?
I think schools should be funded based off of the number of students that you got. Whether your students perform at a high rate or low rate, if you start cutting funding, that kind of defeats the purpose because now you take away from that school's ability to continue to support the students. I'm not a fan of standardized tests, never have been. The standardized tests aren't standard. And so with a district as diverse as ours, you can't have a standardized test, one. Two, again, I go back, if we were funded based off of how our students perform on a test, then we would get less and less money in some cases, considering the academic performance gap. So I think supporting that would be counterintuitive.
Thank you, Mr. Adams. Mr. Mills.
Let me first say that I don't think that I'm a huge fan that one test carries so much weight, not just necessarily for funding, but in general for these kids as far as, whether they get to advance or not advance. With that said, it's kind of a state mandated issue. I don't think that the money that the district receives should be tied to that directly. I think we should try to come up with some other type of formula that we can use to evaluate these districts rather than just one test on one day. I was a sports guy growing up, still am a sports guy, and everybody has an off day. And so I hate for a kid to be judged or our district to be tied to funding based on how kids do for one day. But with that said, as it relates to this year's STAAR testing, I think it's important that the kids do take this test. And the reason why I say that is we can't identify where these kids are and what learning gaps have been created in the last year unless we take the test and understand where the kids are. And so taking the STAAR test, while I don't like the fact that the weight that it carries, I think we need to take it this year, especially so we can identify the learning gaps. Because as I said earlier, COVID has amplified discrepancies in many ways, not just within schools, but across the board and in communities that were already struggling. And so we have campuses that were hurting and struggling academically before COVID. And again, COVID has amplified these things. And so we need to know at least where these kids stand so we can come up with a game plan on how to address these learning gaps and start filling them in.